The next morning, the sunlight poured through the tall glass windows of the Pierce mansion, illuminating the elegant marble floors. The place was quiet, too quiet for a home that usually hummed with staff activity. Walton stood in the living room, his hands in his pockets, his expression unreadable. He hadn't slept. Katherine was resting upstairs with the baby, finally safe after the long, terrifying night. Walton had carried both of them inside himself, refusing to let the guards or staff intervene. He couldn't get the image out of his head. Katherine sitting on that bench, her head resting against the cold wood, his son bundled in her arms. He'd replayed her words all night. "Your brother's assistant came to the mansion. He wanted to enter the nursery." That single sentence had burned in his mind. Now, as the morning light filled the house, Walton's jaw tightened. His younger brother Liam had always been unpredictable. Charming in public, careless in private. Walton had trusted him for years, even brought him into the company after their father's passing. But lately, there had been signs. Missing documents, financial discrepancies. Too many coincidences. And now, someone sent to the house. Walton's fists clenched. "If this is what I think it is," he muttered under his breath, "then Liam's gone too far." Just then, the soft creak of the staircase broke his thoughts. He turned to see Katherine standing there, dressed in fresh clothes, the baby cradled in her arms. She looked fragile but calmer than before. "Good morning," she said quietly, her voice unsure. Walton softened his tone. "You should still be resting." "I couldn't," she admitted, glancing down at the baby. "I just needed to make sure everything was really okay." He nodded. "It is. You're safe here. I've already replaced the mansion's security codes and informed the guards. No one enters without my direct permission." Katherine's lips parted slightly, surprise flickering across her face. "You did that for us?" "For him," Walton said, gesturing to the baby. Then, after a pause, he added, "And for you. You did something last night that I'll never forget." Her eyes lowered, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. "I only did what any mother would do," she whispered. That word, mother, hung in the air for a moment longer than it should have. Walton felt his chest tighten, though he didn't understand why. He cleared his throat and gestured toward the dining room. "Come, you need to eat. We'll talk afterward." The breakfast table gleamed with silver cutlery and steaming plates, but Katherine barely touched her food. She sat quietly, the baby sleeping beside her in his carrier. Walton, on the other hand, was lost in thought, his phone pressed to his ear as he spoke to his head of security. "Yes, check every camera feed from last night," he said sharply, "especially near the east gate. If Liam's assistant, Thomas Reed, entered the property, I want to see it." He hung up and leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. Katherine watched him carefully. "Mr. Pierce," she began hesitantly, "I don't want any trouble because of me. If it's easier, I can leave after today." Walton looked up immediately. "You're not going anywhere," she blinked. "Sir?" "You're the reason my son is alive," he said, his tone steady but firm. "If Thomas really came to harm Ethan and you stopped him, then you're the only person I can trust right now." Tears glimmered in her eyes, though she quickly looked away to hide them. "Thank you," she whispered. Before Walton could respond, his phone buzzed again. It was the head of security. "Sir," the voice said, "we found something." Walton's spine straightened. "Go on." "There's footage of Thomas at the east gate around 10:37 p.m. He uses an old entry code, one that was deactivated months ago, but the system glitched and let him in. He stayed inside for about 15 minutes, then left in a hurry." Walton's jaw tightened. "And he went straight to the nursery?" "Yes, sir. The cameras near that hallway were disabled." Walton's expression darkened. "Disabled how?" "Physically unplugged." "From the inside." Katherine covered her mouth in shock. "He really did try to—" Walton nodded grimly. "He knew exactly where to go. Which means this wasn't random." There was silence for a few seconds. The only sound was the faint ticking of the antique wall clock. Finally, Walton stood up. "I'm going to the office. I need to see Liam." Katherine looked uneasy. "Do you think your brother knew about this?" Walton hesitated. "I don't know. But if he did—" His voice trailed off. heavy with unspoken meaning. Then this isn't just betrayal. It's war. Hours later, Walton stood in his brother's office on the top floor of Pierce Enterprises. Liam sat casually behind his desk, spinning a pen between his fingers. His carefree smile faded the moment he saw Walton's expression. "Wow, you look like you've seen a ghost," Liam joked weakly. "Rough night?" Walton slammed a folder onto the desk. "Don't play dumb." "Thomas was at my house last night." Liam froze. "Thomas?" "Yes, the same Thomas who works for you. He entered my home after midnight, went straight to the nursery, and disabled the cameras." Liam's eyes darted nervously. "Walton, that's insane." "Why would he—" "Because someone told him to," Walton interrupted coldly. "And unless your assistant suddenly grew a death wish, I'm guessing that someone was you." For the first time, Liam's confident facade cracked. He stood up, hands trembling slightly. "You don't understand." "Oh, I understand perfectly," Walton snapped. "You've been tampering with the company's accounts for months. You knew I was starting to investigate. Maybe you thought hurting my son would distract me long enough for you to cover your tracks." "That's not true." Liam's voice shook. "It wasn't supposed to go that far." "Thomas said he just wanted to scare you." Walton's hand slammed the desk. "He broke into my home, Liam, my home." The room fell silent. For a long moment, all Walton could hear was the pounding of his own heart. Then he stepped back, his voice colder than ever. "You're finished here. I'll handle Thomas myself, and you'll answer to the police." As Walton turned to leave, Liam's voice cracked behind him. "You're going to destroy our family over this?" Walton didn't even look back. "You did that the moment you put my son in danger." Back at the mansion that evening, Katherine sat by the window, rocking Ethan gently in her arms. When Walton entered, she looked up, searching his face. "Did you find out the truth?" she asked softly. He nodded. "Yes, it was Liam. He sent Thomas to create chaos, but he didn't realize how close he came to losing everything." Katherine's eyes softened. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Pierce." Walton looked at her quietly for a moment, then shook his head. "No, Katherine. I'm sorry. I trusted the wrong people. And I failed to see the one who was truly loyal." She blinked, surprised by the emotion in his voice. "From now on," he continued, "you're not just a maid in this house. You're family." Katherine's heart skipped. She opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, the baby stirred and began to cry softly. Walton smiled faintly and leaned closer, gently touching his son's tiny hand. "Looks like he agrees," he said quietly. And as the night fell once again over the Pierce mansion, Katherine realized that maybe, just maybe, her place in this house was about to change forever. The following days moved slowly, as if time itself was holding its breath. The scandal surrounding Liam's betrayal had shaken not just Walton's family, but the entire foundation of Pierce Enterprises. Walton sat in his office late one night, the skyline glittering through the glass behind him. On his desk lay a stack of documents, financial reports, secret accounts, offshore transfers, all of them proof that his younger brother had been stealing from the company for months. But what troubled Walton more than the numbers was the question behind them. Who else was involved? Because Liam could never have pulled off something this elaborate on his own. The door creaked open softly, breaking his thoughts. Walton turned to see Katherine standing there, holding a tray with coffee. She wore a modest dress, her hair tied neatly, but there was a calm strength in her eyes that hadn't been there before. "I thought you might need this," she said quietly. Setting the tray down, he gave her a tired smile. "You're starting to read my mind." "I just noticed you didn't come down for dinner," she replied. "And you've been here since morning." Walton leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. "It's been a long week." Katherine hesitated, then took a small step forward. "If it's about your brother—" "You'll make it right. You always do." Her confidence startled him. For months she'd barely spoken unless asked to. But now her words carried quiet certainty, like she'd finally found her voice. He studied her for a moment. "You seem very sure of that." "I've seen how you treat people," she said softly. "Even your staff. You're not like most men with your kind of money. You listen. You notice things." Walton let out a low chuckle. And yet, I didn't notice what was happening under my own roof. Katherine looked at him gently. You can't see everything, Mr. Pierce, but you can choose what to do next. That's what makes you different. He looked at her, his chest tightening for reasons he didn't fully understand. There was something about her presence, steady, unassuming, yet deeply grounding, that he hadn't realized he needed until now. Before he could respond, his phone buzzed on the desk. He frowned and picked it up. It was a message from an unknown number. If you think Liam acted alone, you're wrong. Look inside your own company. His blood ran cold. He stared at the message, then at Katherine, who was watching him with quiet concern. Is something wrong? She asked. Walton stood abruptly, grabbing his jacket. Stay here. Don't leave the house until I get back. Her eyes widened. Mr. Pierce, where are you going? To the company archives, he said, his voice low. If someone else was helping Liam, I need to find out who before they destroy everything my father built. The drive through the city was silent. The night sky loomed heavy above, clouds hiding the stars. Walton's thoughts raced. The Pierce Empire had taken 3 generations to build, and now it was rotting from within. When he arrived at the company headquarters, the security guard hesitated. Mr. Pierce, it's almost midnight. Are you sure you want to? I'm not asking, Walton said curtly, flashing his ID. Inside the darkened building, only the emergency lights glowed faintly. His footsteps echoed as he entered the archive room, a massive chamber filled with shelves of confidential records. He headed straight to the restricted section, where Liam's department had stored project files. But when he reached for the cabinet lock, something caught his attention. The lock was broken. Someone had been here before him. His pulse quickened. He opened the drawer and found it empty. Not a single document remained. Then, from behind him, a voice said quietly, You shouldn't have come alone. Mr. Pierce. Walton spun around. Thomas Reed, Liam's assistant, stood near the doorway, a smug smile curling his lips. His arm was in a sling, a reminder of the scuffle with security the night he'd been caught trying to flee. I thought you were in custody, Walton said coldly. Money talks, Thomas sneered. You should know that better than anyone. Walton took a step closer, his expression hardening. Where are the files? Thomas smirked. Gone, along with everything that could prove who else was involved. But I'll tell you this, your brother wasn't the mastermind. Someone much closer to you was pulling the strings. Walton's stomach twisted. Who? Thomas leaned in, lowering his voice. Your father's lawyer, Mr. Harkins. He's been moving money offshore for years. Liam just got caught in his web. Before Walton could react, Thomas slipped a flash drive from his pocket and tossed it onto the floor. That's all the proof you'll need. But I'd leave town if I were you. Once Harkins realizes you're digging, you'll be next. And then, Thomas was gone, vanishing into the shadows like a ghost. Walton stood frozen, the flash drive glinting at his feet. Back at the mansion, Katherine paced nervously near the window, the baby monitor in her hand. Every tick of the clock made her heart race faster. She didn't know where Walton had gone, but something in his voice before leaving told her it was dangerous. When the heavy front door finally opened, she ran to the hallway. Mr. Pierce, she breathed out, relief flooding her. You're safe. Walton looked exhausted, his suit slightly rumpled, his eyes shadowed, but in his hand he held the flash drive. I found something, he said, his voice low. Proof, not just against Liam, against everyone who helped him. Katherine frowned. Who? He hesitated, then replied, My father's old lawyer, the man I trusted to handle everything after his death. Katherine's brows knit together. So he's the one behind it all? Walton nodded slowly. He manipulated Liam, and he's been stealing from the company for years. He exhaled shakily. If this data is real, it could expose him completely. But it'll also drag my family name through the mud. Katherine stepped closer. Then let it. Truth is always better than living under lies. Her words hit him like lightning. He looked at her, really looked at her. This woman who had once been invisible in his mansion was now the only person speaking truth to him, the only person unafraid of what he might lose. You're right, he said softly. It's time to end this. Katherine smiled faintly. Then you're not alone, Mr. Pierce. For the first time in days, Walton allowed himself to breathe. Call me Walton, he said gently. Her eyes lifted, surprised. Walton? He smiled. After everything we've been through, I think you've earned that much. That night, as the rain began to fall against the glass, Walton inserted the flash drive into his laptop. The files opened one by one. Bank statements, secret contracts, forged signatures, all leading back to the same man, Harkins and Associates. But as the final document loaded, a chill ran down Walton's spine. It wasn't just financial fraud. It was something far darker, a list of names. A list of people Harkins had paid, journalists, board members, and someone on Walton's own security team, someone still inside the mansion. He looked up suddenly, realizing what that meant. Katherine, he said urgently, standing from his chair. Where's Ethan? Her eyes widened in confusion. Upstairs, sleeping. Why? Walton's gaze darted to the window. A faint shadow moved past the garden lights. It's not over, he whispered. They're here. The sound came again, soft, deliberate, and close. A creak of a floorboard. A faint rustle near the hall. Walton's heart pounded as he glanced toward the glass doors that opened into the garden. The rain outside shimmered under the security lights, but beyond that, he saw movement. Someone was inside the gates. Stay here, he whispered to Katherine, but she shook her head firmly. No, I'm not leaving you again. Not tonight. Her voice was steady, but fear flickered behind her eyes. Walton could see it. Yet there was something else, too. A quiet courage that reminded him of that night on the bench. The woman who'd once been his maid was now standing beside him like a soldier. He reached into the drawer of his desk and pulled out a small handgun. Take this, he said. Katherine took a step back. You don't need to use it, he interrupted gently, pressing it into her trembling hands. Just hold it. Keep it with you. Stay with Ethan. I'll check the cameras. Katherine nodded, her grip tightening around the weapon. Be careful. Walton gave her one last look before turning toward the control room. The mansion's security system displayed a wall of monitors, each showing a different angle of the estate. Walton's fingers flew across the keyboard as he rewound the live feed. His stomach dropped. A van had pulled up 15 minutes ago, unmarked, headlights off. 3 men had jumped the side fence and were moving toward the east wing, the part of the house where Ethan's room was. And the leader. He froze when the camera caught his face. Harkins, his father's lawyer, the man who had smiled through every family dinner, held baby Ethan during his baptism, and promised loyalty to the Pierce legacy. Rage boiled in Walton's veins. He grabbed his phone, dialing security, but there was no response. The call dropped instantly. His network had been jammed. They've cut the signal, he muttered. He sprinted toward the stairs. Katherine sat on the bed beside Ethan's crib, her heart racing with every sound from the hallway. The rain had grown heavier, battering the windows like a warning. Ethan stirred softly in his sleep, unaware of the storm both inside and out. Then, a shadow moved under the door. Katherine froze. She stood, clutching the gun close to her chest, her breath shallow. The door handle turned slowly, her finger trembled over the trigger. Who's there? She whispered, no answer. Just the faint click of the lock. And then, the door burst open. A tall man in a raincoat stepped in, his face hidden under a hood. Where's the baby? He barked. Katherine's body reacted before her mind did. She pointed the gun straight at him. Don't come any closer. He took another step, smirking. You won't shoot! Try me! She hissed, her voice shaking but firm. For a heartbeat, the world stood still. Then a deep voice thundered from the hallway. Drop it! The intruder turned just as Walton appeared, his own gun raised. His expression was pure fire. Step away from her, Walton growled. The man hesitated, then lunged toward the baby's crib. The next second, a loud crack echoed through the room. The intruder fell, clutching his leg. Katherine stood frozen, her hands trembling as the gun smoked faintly. She'd fired. Walton rushed forward, kicking the weapon out of the man's reach. "Katherine, are you hurt?" She shook her head, her breath uneven. "No, I didn't mean to." He took her face gently in his hands. "You saved him again." Before she could answer, a slow clapping sound came from the doorway. "Well done!" "Walton!" a voice drawled. Walton turned. There stood Harkins, his silver hair slicked back, his suit immaculate despite the rain. Behind him, two more men held small pistols, aimed directly at Walton. "So, you finally figured it out," Harkins said, smiling coldly. "You always were your father's son, brilliant but sentimental." Walton's grip tightened. "Why, after everything my family gave you, why betray us?" Harkins laughed. "Because your father built this empire on lies. You think your wealth is clean? Half those contracts were stolen. I merely took my share of what was already tainted." Walton's jaw hardened. "My father made mistakes." "But you made crimes." "Maybe so," Harkins sneered, stepping closer. "But tonight, the last Pierce heir dies, and everything you own becomes mine." He raised his gun. But before he could pull the trigger, Katherine moved. She lunged forward, grabbing a small lamp and smashing it into the nearest guard's head. The light shattered, sparks flying. The second guard turned in shock, just as Walton tackled him to the floor. The gun went off. A deafening blast. A scream. Smoke filled the room. When the dust settled, Harkins lay against the wall, his shoulder bleeding. His gun had fallen from his hand. Walton stood over him, breathing hard, his suit soaked in sweat and rain. "It's over," he said coldly. "The police are on their way." Harkins spat blood, his voice trembling. "You think this ends with me?" "You don't know the half of it." Walton crouched, his voice low and dangerous. "Then I'll find every name, every file, every man who thought they could touch my son." He stood, picking up his phone. "And I'll make sure you never walk free again." By morning, the mansion was swarming with police. Officers led Harkins and his men away in handcuffs, their faces pale under the flashing blue lights. Walton gave his statement calmly, though exhaustion clung to every breath. When it was over, he turned to where Katherine stood near the garden, holding Ethan. She looked small against the rising dawn, but strong, radiant, and unbreakable. As he walked toward her, she smiled faintly. "It's finally over." He nodded, his eyes softening as he looked at his son sleeping peacefully. "Because of you." There was a long pause, filled only by the sound of birds and the faint rustle of leaves. Then Walton said quietly, "Katherine, I've spent years surrounded by people who cared about what I had. You're the only one who ever cared about who I was." Her breath caught. "Walton!" He stepped closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't want you to be just my employee anymore." Tears welled in her eyes. "Then what do you want me to be?" He smiled softly. "Family. If you'll let me," she blinked, stunned. "Family?" He nodded. "Ethan already sees you as his mother, and I think I started seeing you as more than that a long time ago." For a moment, neither spoke. Then Katherine, tears streaming silently down her cheeks, whispered, "Yes, I'll stay. Always." Walton reached out and wrapped his arms around her and the baby, pulling them close. For the first time in years, he felt peace. Not the kind that came from wealth or power, but from something far deeper. Love. As the morning sun broke through the clouds, the three of them stood together by the window, a billionaire, a maid, and the child who had unknowingly brought them together. And for Walton Pierce, it was no longer about rebuilding his empire. It was about rebuilding his life.